go here. Hello everyone, this is Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to study paper 155, Fleeing Through Northern Galilee. Galilee. I'm sorry, what did I say? Gallery. A little tired. And this starts on page 1725 of the original book, or paper 155 in the other books. And we'll say a little prayer and get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight that we might study this wonderful revelation that you provided for us, that we might understand where we came from, where we're going, and what's expected of us as we travel the ascension plan. We pray that you'll open our hearts and minds tonight, that we might learn something and share it with others, and that we might do your will in our lives. We thank you and we give you the praise in the name of your Son Jesus, or Michael and God. Amen. Okay, fleeing through northern Galilee. Soon after the landing near Caressa on this eventful Sunday, Jesus and the 24 went a little way to the north, where they spent a night in a beautiful park south of Bethsaida Julius. They were familiar with this camping place, having stopped there in days gone by. Before retiring for the night, the Master called his followers around him and discussed with them the plans for their projected tour through Britannia and northern Galilee to the Phoenician coast. So this is after they left Capernaum, after the Capernaum crisis, right? And this is a map of that. Oh, I forgot to change my slide already. That was the slide we just read. Okay. Let's see. Diane, would you take the first one?
Why do the heathen rage? Said Jesus, you should all recall how the psalmist spoke of these times, saying, why do the heathen rage and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers of the people take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break the bonds of mercy asunder, and let us cast away the cords of love.
Okay, so who are the heathen they're talking about here, the psalmist? He was talking about everyone who was not of the Israeli faith or the Jewish faith, right? That they were all considered heathens during that time. And the question is, why do these heathen or the people outside the Jewish religion rage about everything that's going on, with the Jewish people? And they rage against what they consider God the Father, which is considered the Lord, right? And the psalmist is basically saying, let us break the bonds of mercy asunder, let us cast away the cords of love. In other words, break away from the Father, break away from his mercy, and do what we want to do, rather than be good sons and daughters of God, right? And this is Jesus' comment on this psalmist statement. Millie, would you take the next one, please?
Yes, just it seems he put down the Lord and what he wanted. Does that mean he's going to hell?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all, because what he was talking about is the heathens wanted to break away from God. Okay, so that's what the psalmist was talking about, not the psalmist themselves or the Jewish faith, right? But that included many of those who did believe in the Jewish religion and were children of Israel, right? They also were included in this concept of the heathen raging, because those are the ones that had what? Those are the ones that are considered to have the Father's mercy, right? And they wanted to break away from that free mercy and do whatever they wanted to do. Okay. So when we include the heathen, it's just not those outside the Jewish religion, right? I didn't want to give you that impression, but it also included those. And what Jesus is talking about here, when he says heathen, he's talking about all those that don't believe in God, right? Okay.
Today you see this fulfillment before your eyes, but you shall not see the remainder of the psalmist's prophecy fulfilled, for he entertained erroneous ideas about the Son of Man and his mission on earth. My kingdom is founded on love, proclamation and mercy, proclaimed in mercy, and established by unselfish service. My Father does not sit in heaven laughing in derision at the heathen, who is not wrathful in his great displeasure. True is the promise that the Son shall have these so-called brethren, these so-called heathen, in reality his ignorant and untaught brethren, for an inheritance, and I will receive these Gentiles with open arms of mercy and affection, and all this loving kindness shall be shown the so-called heathen, notwithstanding the unfortunate declaration of the record which intimates that the triumphant Son shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. The psalmist exhorted you to serve the Lord with fear. I bid you to enter into the exalted privilege of divine sonship by faith. He commands you to rejoice with trembling. I bid you rejoice with assurance. He says, kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish when his wrath is kindled. But you who have lived with me know well that anger and wrath are not a part of this establishment of the kingdom of heaven in the hearts of men. But the psalmist did glimpse the true light in them. Finishing this exhortation, he said, blessed are they who put their trust in this Son.
So let's kind of get the concept of the people of that day when the psalmist was talking, right? Even up to today. And that is the fact that the churches or the religious authorities have always taught that God is wrathful, right? And that you should fear the Lord rather than love the Lord. And that God shows mercy rather than punish you and put you under the iron fist, right? So Jesus is trying to teach us here that God is all about love, and divine sonship is about faith and love, right? And that it is true that those Gentiles that did not believe will be given to the Son of God, or Jesus, or Michael, whichever one you want to say, but He will take them in with open arms and show mercy because He knows the type of people they are. You know, many of them are still seeking out God. So basically what He's trying to do is change their mind about how they view God and how they view the kingdom of heaven. He wants them to change their mind and understand that God is about mercy and love, not about wrath and punishment. Right? And that was the difference of the thoughts of that day and what Jesus was trying to teach. And the Jews of that day and the were trying to teach the same message that they had learned from this time of the prophet. Right? All right. Excuse me. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Okay. Jesus continued to teach the 24, saying, the heathen are not without excuse when they rage at us, because their own look is small.
Their outlook.
Right. Is small and narrow. They are able to concentrate their energies enthusiastically. Their goal is near and more or less visible. Wherefore do they strive for valiant and effective execution? You who have professed entrance into the kingdom of heaven are altogether too vacillating and indefinite in your teaching conduct. The heathen strike directly for their objectives. You are guilty of too much chronic yearning. If you desire to enter the kingdom, why do you not take it by spiritual assault even as the heathen take a city they lay siege to. You are hardly worthy of the kingdom when your service consists so largely in an attitude of regretting the past, whining over the present, and vainly hoping for the future. Why do the heathen rage? Because they know not the truth. Why do you languish in futile learning? Because you obey not the truth. Cease your useless learning and go forth bravely, doing that which concerns the establishment of the kingdom.
So he's basically saying that the Jews, or the Sanhedrin, and the Pharisees know what their goal is, right? They attack the people of the kingdom because they are caught up in their own role in what they're doing. They believe everything they're teaching is true, right? So when they go out to destroy these newly formed Christians and that sort of thing, they think they're doing right. So they'll do anything to destroy them, right? And if you think about it, those who are enlightened spiritually, the world, because of our materialistic gains and non-spiritual living, does the same thing. When you try to spread spiritual concept, when you try to spread the kingdom of God, people attack you because they are comfortable in their own doctrine, right? Which is wrong. They're completely wrong. Their doctrine of God being vengeful and hateful and all these things, these are not characteristics of God, are they? And yet Jesus is telling us here that we are languishing in our own yearning for something better instead of going out and taking the kingdom like the heathens do. In other words, set up your spiritual goal and stick to it and go at it like it's the only thing important in the world, right? When you make a commitment, you stay with that commitment. You don't yearn for what's going on in the future because you're living in the now. You have to do things in the now, not for the future, but in the now. So when you're part of the kingdom of God, the things you do has to do with what's going on with the kingdom of God right now. And what's our duty in the kingdom of God? To expand spiritual awareness, right? To make people understand that they are sons of God and brothers and sisters, right? That's thinking in the now, the spiritual now, right? And he goes on to say, we do not obey the truth. In other words, we know what the truth is, but we don't live the truth in our lives, right? So when we know the truth and we let people walk over us and tell us something we know is not true, and we don't stand up for the truth, we don't obey the truth, right? So it's our responsibility to correct these misconceptions, right? And yeah.
The Old Testament and the so-called Word of God teaches that God is vengeful.
Of course it does.
And they aren't going to sway from it.
No, because that's their doctrine, right, Rodney? That's what they. That's what.
But in the New Testament, Jesus teaches that He's love.
Right.
And make wonder of the world.
Yeah, they're counter positions if you think about it. They're just opposite each other, right? So when the Old Testament teaches that God is vengeful and will send you to hell forever and all this other stuff, do you think there's any possibility, now that you're spiritually enlightened, do you think there's any possibility that that's true?
Not at all.
Not at all. You know? So when people tell you you're going to burn in hell for spreading the Urantia Book, which I've been told many times over the years. Yeah. Do you think that's correct? No. It should roll off our back like water off a duck, right? It's meaningless. Okay, and we're going to find out that more tonight with what else Jesus says.
I wanted to just say something on the last there. It says the establishment of the kingdom. This is basically telling us that we are to establish his kingdom. And the reason we're not doing that is because we obey not the truth. And the truth would be the principles that Jesus gave us.
Exactly.
Of our Lord.
That's
And
right.
those are, it's not an outside thing, but it's a renewing of our mind as we face the situations and circumstance of life. We need to come up with mercy, compassion, long-suffering, and all of these things. We need to constantly be renewing our mind in what his principles are instead of the ways of the world.
That's right. And those principles we're talking about, Stephen, is the principles as taught in the Urantia Book. Not the principles that's been rewritten and retaught in the New Testament as Jesus' words, many of which are not. Okay? And that's a very important point. When things are wrong or misquoted by Jesus in the New Testament that we know he did not say, okay, we need to correct that. That's not my Lord speaking, you know.
Roger, I've been reading the red letters in the New Testament,
Uh-huh.
and it's obvious that Jesus, those are quotes that he didn't say.
Yeah, yeah.
Much of it.
If we remember where these things came from, they were told 67 years, they started to be told 67 years after the death of Christ. So they were told as the men remembered them the best they could, right? And if you think about your life, can you remember what someone said to you 67 years ago? I can't. I can tell you I can't. You know, I have trouble
67
remembering what Diane said to me the first of the week, you know, much less 67 years ago.
I can remember that.
Can you?
That's the first part.
All right, let's move on.
Not all of it.
Okay. Stephen, I think you're up.
Okay. In all that you do, come not one-sided, no respect like. The Pharisees, who seek our destruction, verily think they are doing God's service. They have become so narrowed by tradition that they are blinded by prejudice and hardened by fear. Consider the Greeks, who have a science without religion, while the Jews have a religion without science. And when men become thus misled into accepting a narrow and confused disintegration of truth, their only hope of salvation is to become truth coordinated converted.
Or what? They start to become more enlightened and they understand what they're talking about, right? That's what we're saying here, okay? So, because the Pharisees are seeking the destruction of those followers of the kingdom of God, right? They still think they're doing God's service, right? So we have to make some account for that. You know, at least they are doing what they think is right, even though they're in error. Okay, let's go on. Let me emphatically state this eternal truth. If you, by truth coordination, learn to exemplify in your lives this beautiful wholeness of righteousness, your fellow men will then seek after you that they may gain what you have so acquired. The measure wherewith truth seekers are drawn to you represents the measure of your truth endowment, your righteousness. The extent to which you have to go with your message to the people is, in a way, the measure of your failure to live the whole or righteous life, the truth coordinated life. So if you're successful or not with people, it's because of how we have lived our own lives, right? And that shows through. Diane, would you take the next one?
And many other things the Master taught his apostles and the evangelists before they bade him good night and sought rest upon their pillows.
Boy, wouldn't you like to have heard some of these other things that Jesus taught them? When he went out to bed. All right. Millie, would you take the next one?
The evangelist in Chorazin.
Chorazin. Chorazin. Yeah.
Chorazin. On Monday morning, May 23rd, Jesus directed Peter to go to Chorazin. The 12 evangelists, while he, with the 11, departed for Caesarea Philippi, going by way of Jordan and Damascus, Capernaum road. Thence northeast to the junction with the road to Caesarea Philippi, and then on to that city where they tarried and taught for 2 weeks. They arrived during the afternoon of Tuesday, May 24th.
Okay, and that's Caesarea Philippi because it was named after Caesar. Okay? Caesarea Philippi, yeah. Okay, Rodney, would you take the next one?
Peter and the evangelist sojourned in Chorazin for 2 weeks, preaching the gospel of the kingdom to a small but earnest company of believers. But they were not able to win many new converts. No city of all Galilee yielded so few souls for the kingdom as Chorazin. In accordance with Peter's instructions, the 12 evangelists had less to say about healing, things physical, while they preached and taught with increased vigor the spiritual truths of the heavenly kingdom. These 2 weeks at Chorazin constituted of a veritable baptism of adversity for the 12 evangelists, and that it was the most difficult and unproductive period in their careers up to this time. Being thus deprived of the satisfaction of winning souls for the kingdom, each of them, the more earnestly and honestly, took stock of his own soul and his progress in the spiritual paths of the new life.
So notice here they were more concentrated with spiritual truths rather than material problems and issues, right? And the teaching changed, and also the amount of converts changed also. All right. Steve.
When it appeared that no more people were minded to seek entrance into the kingdom, Peter, on Tuesday, June 7th, called his associates together and departed for Caesarea.
Yeah.
To join Jesus and the apostles. They arrived about noontime on Wednesday and spent the entire evening in rehearsing their experience among the unbelievers of Chorazin during the discussion of this evening. Jesus made further reference to the parable of the sower and taught them much about the meaning of the apparent failure of life under techniques.
There we go. Okay. 3 is Caesarea Philippi. Although Jesus did no public work during these 2 weeks, sojourn near Caesarea Philippi, the apostles held numerous quiet evening meetings in the city, and many of the believers came out to the camp to talk with the Master. Very few were added to the group of believers as a result of this visit. Jesus talked with the apostles each day, and they more clearly discerned that a new phase of work of preaching the kingdom of heaven was now beginning. They were commencing to comprehend that the kingdom of heaven is not meat and drink, but the realization of the spiritual joy of the acceptance of divine sonship. Which means what? The Fatherhood of God and the Brotherhood of Man. Right? This is Jesus' message. And this is what the kingdom of heaven is all about. Right?
So no more seeking miracles and all of these other things that they are basically doing today, you know?
Right.
Now it's a lot more of that sonship and the brotherhood, and people do not like that.
That's right.
They
Wrong button here. Okay.
The sojourn at Caesarea Philippi was a real test to the 11 apostles. It was a difficult 2 weeks for them to live through. They were well nigh depressed, and they missed the periodic stimulation of Peter's enthusiastic personality. In these times, it was truly a great and testing adventure to believe in Jesus and go forth to follow after him. Though they made few converts during these 2 weeks, they did learn much that was highly profitable from their daily conferences with the Master.
Okay, notice here that without their leader, Peter, right, they got depressed, right? What do you think happened after the death of Christ? And he was gone, right? And they had to start depending on their own spiritual lives. The depression, they had to get over the depression again because of what? Because Peter was tied up in trying to move the kingdom forward. Why do you think a man like Paul the Apostle comes along and literally almost takes over everything? Because he's dynamic, right? And he was not affected by, like the apostles were, of these absences of Peter or Jesus even more, right? So he was dynamic all the time. And so the apostles depended greatly on Peter as their head, right? The apostles learned that the Jews were spiritually stagnant and dying because they had crystallized truth into a creed, just like we did nowadays with the Bible, right? We have a creed. When truth becomes formulated as a boundary line of self-righteous exclusiveness instead of the serving as signposts of spiritual guidance and progress, such teachings lose their creative and life-giving power and ultimately become merely preservative and fossilizing. Did y'all catch that? So the teachings that the Jews were doing during that period of time came from what? The original Torah, right? And they fossilized all these creeds and all these laws, 630 different rules and regulations into creeds, and so there was no more room for there to be spiritual guidance and progress from the information they had. Now, what happened to the church a couple hundred years after Jesus left? The same exact thing happened. The church turned into creeds and religious ceremonies, and the spiritual aliveness of the church did what? It kind of died down, didn't it? So anybody that came along that had a different idea, what did the church want to do? They wanted to kill them, right? Because they were trying to change that which they had crystallized, right? All right. There's lessons to be learned from all this even today. Okay?
Increasing.
Did you? Oh, sorry. Lily, would you take the next one?
Yes. Increasingly, they learn from Jesus to look upon human personalities in terms of their possibilities in time and in eternity. They learn that many souls can be best be led to love the unseen God by being first taught to love the brethren whom they can see. And it was in this connection that new meaning became attached to the Master's pronouncement concerning unselfish service for one's fellows. Inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of my brethren, you did it to me.
The Brotherhood of Man, right? That's what it's all about. All right. And the more we learn to help our brothers, the more we learn to love them, the more we learn to love God at the same time. Right? The spiritual concept. Rodney.
One of the greatest lessons of this sojourn at Caesarea had to do with original religious traditions, with the great danger of allowing a sense of sacredness to become attached to non-sacred things, common ideas, or everyday affairs. From one conference, they emerged with the teaching that true religion was man's heartfelt loyalty to its highest and truest convictions.
And where do you think that comes from? Your highest and truest convictions. Comes from your theology. Yeah. The will of God. Stephen.
Okay. Jesus warned his believers that if a religious mind were only pure, increasing knowledge of the nature of the word, by the displacement or the supposed supernatural origin of things, ultimately deprive them of their faith in God, but that if their religion were spiritual, never could the progress of physical science disturb their faith in eternal realities and divine values.
So regardless of what happens in the world, scientifically, regardless of what we discover, regardless of what we create, artificial intelligence, all this other stuff, right? If your faith is in God and your values are spiritual, none of these things affect you, regardless of what it is. We can go through the greatest advancements through the next million years, and if your faith is strong, your spirituality should not be disturbed one iota. Because of why? Because your spirituality is about your ascension plan to God the Father. And regardless of what materially happens around you, that plan stays in place, right? It's right here in this sentence. Supernatural origin of things ultimately deprive them of their faith in God. That should never happen, right? They learn that when religion is wholly spiritual in motive, it makes all life more worthwhile, filling it with high purposes, dignifying it with transcendent values, inspiring it with superb motives, all the while comforting the human soul with a sublime and sustaining hope. True religion is designed to lessen the strain of existence. It releases faith and courage for daily living and unselfish service. Faith promotes spiritual vitality and righteous fruitfulness. So faith backs you up all the time, right? Sustains you. Here.
Jesus repeatedly taught his apostles that no civilization could long survive the loss of the best in its religion. And he never grew weary of pointing out to the 12 the great danger of accepting religious symbols and ceremonies in the place of religious experience. His whole earth life was consistently devoted to the mission of thawing out the frozen forms of religion into the liquid liberties of enlightened sonship.
That is a nice concept, isn't it? Thawing it out into the liquid liberties of enlightened sonship. That's the way we need to live, as enlightened sons and daughters of God, right? Okay. Millie.
Yes, on the way to Phoenician. On Thursday morning, June 9th, after receiving word regarding the progress of the kingdom brought by the messengers of David from Bethsaida, this group of 25 teachers of truth left Caesarea
Caesarea Philippi. Caesar.
Philippi to begin their journey to the Phoenician coast. They passed around the marsh country by way of Luz to the point of junction with the Magdala Mount Lebanon Trail Road. Thence to the crossing of the road leading to Sidon, arriving there Friday afternoon.
Right.
While pausing for lunch under the shadow of an overhanging lead rock, dear life, Jesus delivered one of the most remarkable addresses which his apostles ever listened to throughout all their years of association with him. No sooner had they seated themselves to break bread than Simon Peter asked Jesus, "Master, since the Father in heaven knows all things, and since his Spirit is our support in the establishment of the kingdom of heaven on earth, why is it that we flee from the threats of our enemies? Why do we refuse to confront the foes of truth?" But before Jesus had begun to answer Peter's question, Thomas broke in, asking, "Master, I should really like to know just what is wrong with the religion of our enemies at Jerusalem. What is the real difference between their religion and ours? Why is it we are in such diversity of belief when we all profess to serve the same God?" And when Thomas had finished, Jesus said, "Well, I would not ignore people, knowing full well how easy it would be misunderstanding my reasons for avoiding an open clash with rulers of the Jews at just this time. Still, it will prove more helpful to all of you if I choose rather to answer Thomas's question, and that I will proceed to do when you have finished your lunch."
Okay, so he started to answer Peter's question, but Thomas's broke in and he decided to answer his instead, right? Let's go. Hang on, now let me get my control back here. I have a kitty issue. Stephen, would you take the next one?
The Discourse on True Religion. This memorable discourse on religion summarized and restated modern phraseology gave expression to the following truths.
While the religion of the world have a double origin, religions of the world, I should say, have a double origin, natural and revelatory. At any one time and among any one people, there are to be found three distinct forms of religious devotion. And these three manifestations of the religious urge are: 1. Primitive religion, the semi-natural and instinctive urge to fear mysterious energies and worship superior forces, chiefly a religion of the physical nature, a religion of fear. And that's basically what we are taught as we come up as young kids, right? Primitive religion. The religion of civilization, the advancing religious concepts and practices of the civilizing races. The religion of the mind, the intellectual theology of the authority of established religious tradition. Let me go on to the third one, I'll come back to that. True religion, the religion of revelation, the revelation of supernatural values, a partial insight into eternal realities, a glimpse of the goodness and beauty of the infinite character of the Father in heaven, the religion of the Spirit as demonstrated in human experience. Let's go back to 2 for a second. The religion of civilization. These are the creeds and theologies that the Sanhedrin set up. It's the creeds and theologies that the churches set up, right? These are our creeds. These are what we consider right concepts of religious thought, right? That's the religion of civilization. All right? And that's a religion of the mind. And then we go on to true religion. True religion is a combination of both the revelations that we've been given down through the ages through the Caligasta, people that did not rebel, right? Adam and Eve, right? That's the revelation. Melchizedek was a revelation, right? Jesus of Nazareth was the revelation. What's the latest one? The Urantia Book is the revelation. And that is what gives us the true religion, because it teaches us what? Supernatural values, right? And it gives us a glimpse of the goodness and beauty of God the Father, right? And His plan for us in our human experience as we go through this life. And our preparations for what? Going on to the mansion worlds for our Urantia life, and then on to our spiritual life through the constellations and the rings of the moon, right? And that is true religion, and that's what Jesus is trying to teach them, right? And us. All right,
The religion of the physical senses and the superstitious fears of natural man, the Master refused to belittle, though he deplored the fact that so much of this primitive form of worship should persist in the religious forms of the more intelligent races of mankind. Jesus made it clear that the great difference between the religion of the mind and the religion of the spirit is that while the former is upheld by ecclesiastical authority, the latter is wholly based on human experience.
What's ecclesiastical authority?
Religious
Sure.
dogma.
Religious dogma of the churches,
Mhm.
right? They decide what's right, and that's what everybody should go by, right?
And if you don't agree, then you can become excommunicated.
It's the club rules.
Club rules. That's
That's
right.
right.
That's exactly right. And the natural is the superstitious, right?
Mhm.
Do we still have superstitious parts of religions around? Of course we do. You know, we're superstitious about everything. People still won't walk under ladders because they're superstitious about it, right? All these things that have come from our past, right? Okay? Really?
And then the Master, in his hour of teaching, went on to make clear these truths.
Go on and take the next one too.
Until the races become highly intelligent and more fully civilized, there will persist many of those childlike and superstitious ceremonies which are so characteristic of evolutionary religious practices of primitive and backward peoples. Until the human race progresses to the level of a higher and more general recognition of the realities of spiritual experience, large numbers of men and women will continue to show a personal preference for those religions of authority which require only intellectual assent, in contrast to the religion of the spirit, which entails active participation of mind and soul in the faith adventure of grappling with the rigorous realities of progressive human experience.
So you can sit back.
We're having such a hard time wrapping our head around this. I cannot imagine what his 12 disciples are going through.
Oh yeah, I know.
Well, how could he possibly teach them like this is teaching us?
Well, he was.
They have a better grasp of what's going on here than they could even, they still thought the world was flat.
Yeah, that's right, Millie. Plus the fact that look at the benefit we have from, if nothing else, this book, right? You see now by going through all three parts of the beginning of the book is so important because we have a background to build on when Jesus talks to us, right? Without the background, you might as well be talking to the wind because there's no understanding, right? So it's the background that gives us understanding of what he's talking about here when he's talking about the religion of the Spirit, rather than just sitting in a church and just accepting everything they tell you as the truth. You know, it's easy to do that. That's the uncivilized or childlike way to do things. But
Well, people give this book away telling you to read the Jesus papers first, and I never do. I always say ignore the introduction and
Yeah.
start with number 1.
yeah,
And you understand anything you're reading. But when you read the second section, you'll understand more of what you read in the first section, sort of.
yeah,
And in the third section, you'll understand what they're talking about because you read the first and the second.
yeah.
Then when you read the papers, you'll have, and then go back and read the whole thing over again.
That's exactly right. Listen,
It's better to start with the first book, even though I just plowed my way through it, and you did too.
Yeah.
You just went through it and couldn't understand any of what they were talking about.
that's right. That's
The
right.
second section, you got a little more grasp of it because you read the first.
That's right.
And it builds on itself.
Yeah, it does. It builds on itself. And there's something I want to mention on the that when I was preparing, I'm going back through and putting links in so that you can listen to each section while you're reading it without it taking you off the page. I've been working on that for a couple weeks now, a few weeks. Anyway, but in doing that, on the end, and y'all just take note of this, on the end of paper 31, the very end of it, there's a little sub-paragraph that basically states that the first 31 papers was instigated or set up by the authority of the Ancients of Days. They assigned 24 personalities to teach us about the nature of God the Father and the celestial beings high up, right? And it was commissioned by the Ancients of Days. And I've been teaching this book for a while now, and I've been reading it for quite a long time, and it never hit me that it was actually the Ancients of Days that commissioned the first 31 pages of the papers of the book. Did y'all know that? I can't hear you, Millie. You're like...
At that time, do you even know who the Ancients of Days were?
I didn't, Millie. You know, I remember it from the Bible, but
But you didn't know who they were.
yeah, I mean, it could have been the monkeys of Alcatraz. Who knows? You know, because we didn't know who they were. But now that we do, you go back and read something like that, and you go, "Oh wow, the highest judgment authority in the universe commissioned this for me to read it." You know. And when we tell the people about the book, you know, we go at it so timidly. You know, I almost want to say, "Hey, listen, this is the highest judgment authority of the universe. You need to read this." You know, it gives you a little bit different concept of what you're doing, right? And so, you know, we're blessed.
You go back and read it again and again and again.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
You
Okay.
pick it up as you go.
Yeah, that's right. You pick it up as you go. It wasn't there the last time, but it's there this time. Okay, let's move on. Rodney, would you take the next one?
The acceptance of the traditional religions of authority presents the easy way out for man's urge to seek satisfaction for the longings of his spiritual nature. The settled, crystallized, and established religions of authority afford a ready refuge to which the distracted and distraught soul of man may flee from harassed by fear and tormented by uncertainty. Such a religion requires of its devotees as the price to be paid for its satisfactions and assurances only a passive and purely intellectual assent.
So all you got to do is sit there and say, "Okay," right? That's all that's required of you. All right. Stephen.
Okay, and for a long time, there will live on earth those timid, fearful, and hesitant individuals who will prefer thus to secure their religious consolation, even though in so casting their lot with the religious of authority, they compromise the sovereignty of personality, debase the dignity of self-respect, and utterly surrender the right to participate in the most thrilling and inspiring of all possible human experience. The personal quest for truth, the exhilaration of facing the perils of intellectual discovery, the determination to explore the reality of personal religious experience, the supreme satisfaction of experiencing the personal triumph of the actual realization of the victory of spiritual faith over intellectual doubt, as it is honestly won the supreme adventure of all human existence, man seeking God for himself and as himself and finding him.
So, people that do this, that cast their lots with compromise like this, cheat themselves. If you think about it, right? You cheat yourself out of the possibility of discovering all these great religious concepts on your own. And you give up the sovereignty of personality. What are they talking about here? You give up that natural right that the human will is above all, even above all, over the thought adjuster. The human will makes the decisions. And by just accepting someone else's concepts, you debase your own sovereignty and debase your own personality of choice, right? You're giving up your freedom, right? And this is exactly what Lucifer wanted people to do, beings to do. Give up their freedom for concepts, right? And the churches, in essence, in many ways, wants us to do the same thing, right? All right. The religion of spirit means effort, struggle, conflict, faith, determination, love, loyalty, and progress. The religion of the mind, the theology of authority, requires little or none of these exertions from its former believers. Tradition is a safe refuge and an easy path for those fearful and half-hearted souls who instinctively shun the spirit struggles and mental uncertainties associated with those faith voyages of daring adventure out upon the high seas of unexplored truth in search for the farther shores of spiritual realities, as they may be discovered by the progressive human mind and experienced by the evolving human soul. But so by doing this, by allowing other beings to make your choice, you give up the adventure, right? You give up the adventure just like you give up a voyage on the sea, that you can't explore these spiritual realities for yourself because you're saying, I don't know, let someone else tell me, right? Oh, my preacher knows everything, so whatever he says must be true, right? Instead of using their own minds to make their own spiritual decisions, right?
Well,
Yeah.
so many modern Christians are so fearful of that, though, because they're being taught that the world is pretty much owned by Satan. Be fearful of doing that.
That's exactly right, Rodney, and we know that's totally a false teaching, don't we? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a teaching of Caligastia. If you think about it, that is Caligastia's banner of truth, right? That's what he believes. And it's totally opposite of that, right? So when you give up your right to make your own intellectual, spiritual choices, you give up your right to make and grow your own spiritual certainty, don't you? Right? And that's why you always hear me harping on becoming spiritually enlightened. To become spiritually enlightened, what do you have to do? You have to make your own personal choices. No one can tell you what choices you make. You have to discover them for yourself, right? And how do you do that? Effort, struggle, conflict, faith, determination, love, loyalty, and progress. That's how you do that. Right?
That was one of the things that they pointed out in the paper that we just read, that was distributed, that was written actually in 91. It wasn't a paper for Urantia, but it was about the authors, I mean, not the authors. But,
Yeah, how the Urantia book came into
came
being.
about.
Yeah.
They talked about that Caligastia was enraged that the Urantia book was being given to us, on this planet.
This is the information the Midwayers gave us, that
Midwayers,
Caligastia
yeah.
was furious that the Midwayers and the contact celestial beings and the contact commission was putting together this book, this Urantia book, because it told the truth about everything. And so it put Caligastia and Lucifer and Satan in a bad
It
light,
did, yeah.
right? So they were just furious over that happening. And Bill, what we're talking about is I sent out a link to from Albert. I wish I could remember his last name. Anyway, it's from 1991. It's from Mark Kulik, I believe it was. His family was involved. 5 of his family was involved in the original form and the developing of how the Urantia book actually came into existence. So I sent out a link to everybody. You got it. You should have had it in your email today.
Okay.
It's 16 pages long, and I recommend you read it. It's very, very good. So,
Okay.
so anyway, we'll move on.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, and welcome with us, Bill, too. I didn't
Nice to
interrupt.
hear your voice.
Yeah. Okay. Who's up? Okay.
And Jesus went on to say, at Jerusalem, the religious leaders have formulated the various doctrines of their traditional teachers and the prophets of other days into an established system of intellectual beliefs, a religion of authority. The appeal of all such religions is largely due to the mind. And now are we about to enter upon a deadly conflict with such a religion, since we will so shortly begin the bold proclamation of a new religion, a religion which is not a religion in the present day meaning of that word, a religion that makes its chief appeal to the divine spirit of my Father, which resides in the mind of man, a religion which shall derive its authority from the fruits of its acceptance, that will so certainly appear in the personal experience of all who really and truly become believers in the truths of this higher spiritual communion.
So he's talking about it will appeal to the thought adjuster, right? And this new religion is exactly what the Urantia book is teaching us, isn't it? Okay? So it makes the connection. All right? Millie.
Gotcha. Pointing out each of the 24 and calling them by name, Jesus said, "And now which one of you would prefer to take this easy path of conformity to an established and fossilized religion as defended by the Pharisees at Jerusalem, rather than to suffer the difficulties and persecutions attendant upon the mission of proclaiming a better way of salvation to men when you realize the satisfaction of discovering for yourselves the beauties of the realities of a living and personal experience in the eternal truths and supreme grandeurs of the kingdom of heaven? Are you fearful, soft, easy-seeking? Are you afraid to trust your future in the hands of God of truth, the God of truth, whose sons you are? Are you distrustful of the Father whose children you are? Will you go back to the easy path of the certainty and intellectual settledness of the religion of traditional authority? Or will you gird yourselves and go forward with me into that uncertain and troublous future of proclaiming the new truths of the religion of the Spirit, the kingdom of heaven in the hearts of men?"
And these 24 men went forth and did just that, didn't they? 6 of them died on a cross, just like Jesus did, right? So
But
they,
the twins didn't.
pardon me?
The twins didn't.
The twins, well, there were 6 of them that didn't die on the cross. So 6 of them, though, did, and they dedicated their lives to espousing the truth of the kingdom of heaven. So when he asked them this, he was preparing them for the troubles that was coming ahead. that when you make this decision to follow the kingdom of heaven, it's not an easy task. It's not an easy road. And that is true even today, isn't it? Because when you go out and you teach what you believe is truth, you're going to be confronted by Bible thumpers. You're going to be confronted by people that don't believe in Christ at all. You're going to be confronted by atheists. You're going to be confronted by all these people that are used to being in an established, fossilized concept or religion, right? And it's a hard road to hoe, but it's a road to hoe that is more beneficial than the fossilized could ever be, right? Because you have spiritual growth, right? Okay. Rodney, I think you're right.
All 24 of his hearers rose to their feet, continuing to signify their united and loyal response to this, one of the few emotional appeals which Jesus ever made to them. But he raised his hand and stopped them, saying, "Go now apart by yourselves, each man alone with the Father, and there find the unemotional answer to my question." And having found such a true and sincere attitude of soul, speak that answer freely and boldly to my Father and your Father, whose infinite life of love is the very spirit of the religion we proclaim.
What a leader. Stephen, can you take the next one?
Okay. The evangelists and apostles went apart by themselves for a short time. Their spirits were uplifted, their minds were inspired, and their emotions mightily stirred by what Jesus had said. But when Andrew called them together, the Master said unto them, "Let us resume our journey. We go into Phoenicia to tarry for a season. And all of you should pray the Father to transform your emotions of mind and body into the higher loyalties of mind and more satisfying experiences of the Spirit."
So you notice here that Jesus did not continue on anything after this great decision each one of these made. Because of one of the reasons why it could be, it's a personal decision. It's the human will making this decision. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow God the Father. I'm going to be a brother to all mankind, right? And at that point, it's a decision each person makes on their own. It's not a group decision, right? So it's a very solemn occasion, and it's something that has to be contemplated individually, not always shared with others. Right?
Walter,
Yeah.
it reminds me, it's like he's not only teaching them, he's coaching them. When I used to play football, our coach would get us riled up before we went out to play.
Uh-huh.
And that's what it seems like is happening here.
Yeah. It's pep talk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bill is with us.
Yeah. Bill, could you take the next one, please? Turn your mic back on, Bill.
Oh, there we go. Okay. As they journeyed on down the road, the 24 were silent. But presently they began to talk with one another. And by the 3 o'clock that afternoon, they could not go farther. They came to a halt, and Peter, going up to Jesus, said, "Master, you have spoken to us the words of life and truth. We would hear more. We beseech you to speak to us further concerning these matters."
Okay. So he whetted their appetite, didn't he? And they want to hear more. Okay. The second discourse on religion. And so while they passed in the shade of the hillside, Jesus continued to teach them regarding the religion of the Spirit and substance, saying,
You have come out from among those of your fellows who chose to remain satisfied with the religion of mind, who crave security and prefer conformity. You have elected to exchange your feelings of authoritative certainty for the assurances of the spirit of adventurous and progressive faith. You have dared to protest against the grueling bondage of institutional religion and to reject the authority of the traditions of record, which are now regarded as the Word of God. Our Father did indeed speak through Moses, Elijah, Isaiah, Amos, and Hosea, but he did not cease to minister words of truth to the world when these prophets of old made an end of their utterances. My Father is no respecter of races or generations, in that the word of truth is vouchsafed one age and withheld from another. Commit not the folly of calling that divine which is holy human, and fail not to discern the words of truth which come not through the traditional oracles of supposed inspiration.
And this is still applicable today, right? What did people call the Bible? The Word of God, right? Right here it says, to reject the authority of the traditions of record which are now regarded as what? The Word of God. So when you go onward from that point, when you discover something like the Urantia Book, you know, what do you do with those earlier concepts? I'm not going to answer that question. For each person, it's a different answer, right?
I didn't realize that even that generation, that the Old Testament or the Old Scriptures were considered the Word of God.
Right. Just like many people consider the Bible today, right? Okay. Millie, would you take the next one?
Yes. I have called upon you to be born again, to be born of the Spirit. I have called you out of the darkness of authority and the lethargy of tradition into the transcendent light of the realization of the possibility of making for yourselves the greatest discovery possible for human soul to make. The supernal experience of finding God for yourself, in yourself, and of yourself, and of doing all this as a fact in your own personal experience. And so may you pass from death to life, from the authority of tradition to the experience of knowing God. Thus will you pass from darkness to light, from a racial faith inherited to a personal faith achieved by actual experience. And thereby will you progress from a theology of mind handed down by your ancestors to a true religion of spirit, which shall be built up in your souls as an eternal endowment.
And that's exactly what we're doing with this book, aren't we? I mean, really, if you think about it, we're being born again of spirit constantly.
You know, this information in the Jesus Papers was provided by the midwives. There's no way that the Bible could be accurate because it wasn't the exact word of God as the midwives presented it in this book, and that there's nothing written like this in the Bible.
No,
Nothing.
nothing like this in the Bible. That's right.
But we needed something to sustain it until they actually did, this book was allowed to come through.
That's right. We needed something, right?
Right.
That's my clicker. Okay. We'll have to make do to find that later. Let's go on. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Your religion shall change from the mere intellectual belief in traditional authority to the actual experience of living faith, which is able to grasp the reality of God and all that relates to the divine spirit of the Father. The religion of the mind ties you hopelessly to the past. The religion of the spirit consists in progressive revelation and ever beckons you on toward higher and holier achievements in spiritual ideals and eternal values.
Okay, so you go from the religion of the intellect and authority to the religion of actual experience, right? Spiritual enlightenment. Stephen, could you take the next one?
All right. While the religion of authority may impart a present feeling of settled security, you pay for such a transient satisfaction the price of the loss of your spiritual freedom and religious liberty. My Father does not require of you, as the price of entering the kingdom of heaven, that you should force yourself to subscribe to a belief in things which are spiritually repugnant, unholy, and untruthful. It is not required of you that your own sense of mercy, justice, and truth should be outraged by submission to an outworn system of religious form and ceremonies. The religion of the Spirit leaves you forever free to follow the truth, wherever the leadings of the Spirit may take you. And who can judge? Perhaps the Spirit may have something to impart to this generation, which other generations have refused to hear.
Wow. Is that paragraph not mind-blowing if you think about it? You know? Especially when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven will not force you to subscribe to belief in things which are spiritually repugnant, right? Unholy and untruthful. And it's not required of you that your own sense of mercy, justice, and truth should be outraged by submission to an outworn system of religious forms and ceremonies. What does that sound like to y'all? That's our current religious systems, isn't it? So you've been set spiritually free to make your own spiritual judgments on everything. You don't have to have a priest. You don't have to have a preacher. You don't have to have a minister telling you what you need to do. These things are innate with your thought adjuster within yourself, and you can discover all these things on your own. And what is the biggest concept in the Urantia book? This same thing, right? That each person must decide the teachings with its own interpretation of it, right? There aren't any authorities. I'm not the only person that teaches the book. I'm not the only person that knows anything about it. Each one of you has that same ability within you because you have a thought adjuster.
But it be based on the law of love.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I mean, that's where the whole foundation is going to be.
That's correct. We don't have to change that. Okay. Then now he goes on. This is pretty heavy duty. Let's go on. Who's next?
Bill?
Bill? Bill, would you take the next one?
Turn your mic on, Bill. Bill, turn your mic on.
Bill, you turn your mic back on.
There you go. Okay. This next paragraph is one of my most favorite paragraphs in the whole book. Shame on those false religious teachers who would drag hungry souls back into the dim and distant past and there leave them. And so are these unfortunate persons doomed to become frightened by every new discovery, while they are discomfited by every new revelation of truth. The prophet who said, "He will be kept in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on God," was not a mere intellectual believer in authoritative theology. This truth-knowing human had discovered God. He was not merely talking about God.
So we can blame it on some of our teachers to drag us to the path and leave us there, can't we?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of allowing us to grow, and with each new discovery, we continue to grow. We don't shrivel up and become afraid of some new discovery that comes along tomorrow, right? All right, let's go on. I admonish you to give up the practice of always quoting the prophets of old and praising the heroes of Israel, and instead aspire to become living prophets of the Most High and spiritual heroes of the coming kingdom. To honor the God-knowing leaders of the past may indeed be worthwhile, but why in doing so should you sacrifice the supreme experience of human existence, finding God for yourselves and knowing Him in your own souls?
Yep.
That's it. That's the secret, isn't it?
You know, I love this whole section.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Every race of mankind has its own mental outlook upon human existence. Therefore must the religion of the mind ever run true to these various racial viewpoints. Never can the religions of authority come to unification. Human unity and mortal brotherhood can be achieved only by and through the superendowment of the religion of the Spirit. Racial minds may differ, but all mankind is indwelt by the same divine and eternal Spirit. The hope of human brotherhood can only be realized when and as the divergent mind religions of authority become impregnated with and overshadowed by the unifying and ennobling religion of the Spirit, the religion of personal spiritual experience.
And that's in each and every one of us, right? Not a religion of authority. Okay. Millie, would you take the next one, please?
Yes. Did we just do this?
No, this is it.
The religions of authority can only divide men and set them in conscientious array against each other. The religion of the Spirit will progressively draw men together and cause them to become undistinguishably sympathetic with one another, understandingly sympathetic one with another. The religions of authority require of men uniformity and belief, but this is impossible of realization in the present state of the world. The religion of the Spirit requires only unity of experience, uniformity of destiny, making full allowance for the diversity of belief. The religion of the Spirit requires only uniformity of insight, not uniformity of viewpoint and outlook. The religion of the Spirit does not demand uniformity of intellectual views, only unity of spirit feeling. The religions of authority crystallize into lifeless creeds. The religion of the Spirit grows into increasing joy and liberty of ennobling deeds, of loving service and merciful ministration.
Straight from the Master's mouth, right? We could say more. All right. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
But what? Least any of you look with disdain upon the children of Abraham, because they have fallen from these evil days of traditional burials. Our forefathers gave themselves up to the persistent and passionate search for God, and they found Him as no other whole race of men have ever known Him since the times of Adam, who knew much of this as he was himself a son of God. My Father has not failed to mark the long and untiring struggle of Israel ever since the days of Moses, to find God and to know God. For weary generations, the Jews have not ceased to toil, sweat, groan, travail, and endure the sufferings and experience the sorrows of a misunderstood and despised people, all in order that they might come a little nearer the discovery of the truth about God. And, notwithstanding all the failures and falterings of Israel, our fathers progressively, from Moses to the times of Amos and Hosea, did reveal increasingly to the whole world an ever clearer and more truthful picture of the eternal God. And so was the way prepared for the still greater revelation of the Father, which you have been called to share.
And what revelation is he talking about there? Himself. Right? That's the revelation he's talking about there. All right? Yeah. Stephen.
Okay? Never forget, there's only one adventure which is more satisfying and thrilling than the attempt to discover the will of the living God. And that is the supreme experience of honestly trying to do that divine will. And fail not to remember that the will of God can be done in any earthly occupation. Some callings are not holy and others secular. All things are sacred in the lives of those who are spirit-led. That is, subordinate to truth, ennobled by love, dominated by mercy, and restrained by fairness, justice. The Spirit which my Father and I shall send into the world is not only the Spirit of truth, but also the Spirit of idealistic youth.
So Jesus teaches us here that there is no such thing as a sacred and secular occupation, is there? Everything in your life is sacred. Everything. Right? Bill, would you take the next one, please? Turn your mic back on, Bill.
Okay. You must cease to seek for the Word of God only on the pages of the olden records of theologic authority. Those who are born of the Spirit of God shall henceforth discern the Word of God, regardless of whence it appears to take origin. Divine truth must not be discounted because the channel of its bestowal is apparently human. Many of your brethren have minds which accept the theory of God while they spiritually fail to realize the presence of God. And that is just the reason why I have so often taught you that the kingdom of heaven can best be realized by acquiring the spiritual attitude of a sincere child. It is not the mental immaturity of the child that I commend to you, but rather the spiritual simplicity of such an easy, believing, and fully trusting little one. It is not so important that you should know about the fact of God, as that you should increasingly grow in the ability to feel the presence of God.
Your thought adjuster, right?
Oh yes. And it's been, like I said, this whole section, one of my favorite sections in the whole book.
It is. It's great. When you begin to find God in your soul, presently you will begin to discover Him in other men's souls and eventually in all creatures and creations of the mighty universe. But what chance does the Father have to appear as a God of supreme loyalties and divine ideals in the souls of men who give little or no time to the thoughtful contemplation of such eternal realities? While the mind is not the seat of spiritual nature, it is indeed the gateway thereto. So you have to allow yourself thought and your mind time to think about spiritual things and spiritual concepts. Right? Anyway.
But do not make the mistakes of trying to prove to other men that you have found God. You cannot consciously produce such valid proof, albeit there are two positive and powerful demonstrations of the fact that you are God-knowing, and they are, 1, the fruits of the Spirit of God showing forth in your daily routine life. 2, the fact that your entire life plan furnishes positive proof that you have unreservedly risked everything you are and have on the adventure of survival after death in the pursuit of the hope of finding the God of eternity, whose presence you have foretasted in time.
That's it right there. There's the key. Comment further on it. Millie.
Yes. Now mistake not, my Father will ever respond to the faintest flicker of faith. He takes note of the physical and superstitious emotions of the primitive man. And with those honest but fearful souls, whose faith is so weak that it amounts to little more than an intellectual conformity to a passive attitude of assent to religious authority, the Father is ever alert to honor and foster even all such feeble attempts to reach out to him. But for you who have been called out of darkness into the light, you are expected to believe with a whole heart. Your faith shall dominate the combined attitudes of body, mind, and spirit.
So even though some of these people that are sitting in churches and that's their only action to religious life at all, are still welcomed by God the Father, right? But as believers and spiritually enlightened people, we have a bigger responsibility, right? Oops. Let's get
You gotta go down.
You are my apostles.
You are my boss. There we go. All right. Okay. Right.
You are my apostles, and to you religion shall not become a theologic shelter to which you may flee in fear of facing the rugged realities of spiritual progress and idealistic adventure, but rather shall your religion become the fact of real experience which testifies that God has found you, idealized, ennobled, and spiritualized you, and that you have enlisted in the eternal adventure of finding the God who has thus found and sonship you.
So it's our responsibility because God has found us and we should act differently, right? All right, Stephen.
And when Jesus had finished speaking, he beckoned to Andrew and pointing to the west toward Nocia said, "Let us be on our way."
That's it. Next time we'll go through paper 156, the Sojourn at Tyre and Sodom. What a paper. That was a very good one. Let's have a little prayer and we'll close for the night. Bill, would you like to pray for us tonight?
Okay, yes, I'll be glad to. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we just give you thanks for this day that you've given us and this meeting night that you've given us, Heavenly Father. And again, please learn more, delve into the teaching that you have given us in this book that you have, the new latest revelation of yourself that you have given us. And Heavenly Father, we just ask and pray that it not only nourish our minds, but also our spirits as well. And we just thank you for the people that you have put us with, that you have blessed them with the ability to read and understand and lead others into the same understanding that they have. And we just thank you, and Heavenly Father, we just ask and pray that with all the things that are going on this planet, Heavenly Father, we just ask and pray that you be with all who have great trials and tribulations right now, and give them strength and courage to get through what they have to go through. And we just thank you and pray these things in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen. And thank you at home for joining us. Thanks for listening again.